Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. The Grant.
My name is Niels Tudor Winter, and I'm the creator, editor, and host of The Grant. The Grant is an independent podcast initiative with the ambition to dig into all corners of the EU R&D funding system on topics of interest for the full EU R&D funding community. Finally, after 120 episodes of this initiative, I managed to get a program committee representative into the virtual podcast studio. And why is that important? Because the program committees are core parts of the formal structure in relation to the EU framework programs for research and development, or Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe and FP10, as they are more commonly known. The program committees are where the EU Commission and the framework program participant countries sit in the same room and formally process and finally decide the whole structure and individual core content of all the framework programs, work programs. For anyone applying for funding, it is important to understand how the work programs come to life, how the process between governments and the EU Commission is structured, and not less how you can get your voice heard in relation to work program content. I managed to get Maltese NCP and Program Committee member Ian Gauji-Borda into the virtual podcast studio to record the official The Grant introduction to the Program Committee system and how it works. This is great. Please enjoy.
Grant. Welcome to The Grant, the EU funding podcast. Today, I am doing a recording on something I've been doing myself, a function I've been having myself many years ago when I started out working with EU R&D funding. I'm going to talk about the program committees today. This is highly interesting for everybody out there that are dealing with Horizon Europe. And I'm so lucky that I have a guest in that is sitting in program committees right now. So, Ian, welcome.
Thank you, Niels. I'm happy to be here. Happy to share a little bit of my knowledge on program committees and how they work, what we do, getting an insight, and maybe even a deep dive into what we do. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. It's gonna be nice. Since I've been one myself, it should be there should be a basis for a nice conversation and reflection and so on how these things work. Disclaimer to all the listeners: I have a summer cold, so if you think my voice sounds a little rusty or whatever than it normally does, that's why. Now, Ian, can you share with the listeners and me a little bit about yourself, your background, and your experience with within the EU R&D funding world?
Okay, so my name is Ian Gauji-Borda. I am from Malta. I've been working with the Malta Council for Science and Technology, which is the governmental arm of for research and innovation for the past 17 years. I've held various posts. So I started off as a technical attaché in Brussels. And my job there was negotiating on behalf of the Maltese government in the Council of Ministers and preparing for ministerial councils. Then I moved on and I was promoted to Deputy Director for Internationalization, and there I was responsible for all the international programs run by MCST, so the funding programs run by MCST. And then I moved on, and now today I am the National Contact Point and Program Committee member for Widening European Research Area, the Health Cluster, the Cancer Mission, and Research Infrastructure. So, as you can imagine, many areas because we are a small country. So we tend to take over quite a number of responsibilities and areas. So this gives us, it has its advantages and disadvantages, which I will explain further on in this podcast. So
we have overlapping experiences there because it's a little bit the same with Denmark. You know, you have prioritized areas, of course. We're a little bigger than you. inhabitant-wise, but I was covering ICT, energy, and SMEs when I was a government representative. I was not I did the program committee work for energy and SMEs. I'm happy I didn't have ICT. but but energy alone was quite substantial. No, so I know what you're talking about. Anyways, before we move into the topic itself, do you want to say a few words about where you work, or it will come naturally onto that when we talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've already summarized where I work more or less. So as I said, I am at the moment in my current position. I am the program committee member and national contact point for the areas I explained before. I also have wear other hats, like I'm also the national delegate on S3. I'm also the national delegate on the ERIC committee, and a number of other commission expert groups where I am a member. So,
all right, that's fine, because we will naturally, when we talk about what we're going to talk about today, we will touch upon the size of the organization and how you organize yourself and so on and so forth. So dear listeners, you can consider this the grand official introduction to the program committee, so to say. So we're going to run through this step by step. So what are they, the functions, working procedures, and so on and so forth. So this is going to be your go-to episode if you want to get an introduction to how does the program committees work. That's how we structure it. But in between this, you can already now sense that Ian and I, we're going to share a little bit also on the side on experience and so on. Now, Ian, I'm gonna give this one over to you. Flying, short overall intro talk, short overall flying on the program committees. What are they?
So basically, the program committee revolve around the Horizon Europe program, and it is dissected in each cluster, in each area, in each pillar. So you have program committees for every single area that you can see on the structure of the Horizon Europe program. So you have a program committee for MSCA, you have a program committee for cluster 1, cluster 2, cluster 3, cluster 4, cluster 5. You have a program committee for widening and the European research area. You have program committees also for the EIC in pillar 3. So basically it is the talking shop when it comes to negotiation of the work programs and the following of the different areas of the Horizon Europe program. So the program committees bring together all the EU member states and associated countries. So also the associated countries to the Horizon Europe program are also invited to the program committees, and we discuss and negotiate the work programs, the biannual work programs, where we agree on the calls. We also look into matters when it comes to matters of ethical principles, security questions, for example, that might be raised in certain proposals. Reserve lists, we discuss the reserve lists. We see the results. We see overview of results. We discuss also the needs and gaps of the area in particular. So in a nutshell, this is what we do in the program committee.
Yeah, what you can say is that it's the place where the member states, they have their say.
Yes.
Yeah, so you have all the big work that is being done, whatever logistics you have for each work program, where it comes from, technology platforms for the European partnerships that are involved. So you have all these structures where the flow of it comes in. Each has its own logic, how the work program comes to life, so to say. And then in the end, when it's ready, so to say, the draft, then the member states step in as the members of the European Union. You have the Commission, and then you have the member states being the ones that are controlling the Commission, so to say. Yeah, so that's where they sit and have their say on. So it's sort of guided. We'll come back to this, yeah, because it's the input that comes. They don't have an influence. Some of them, they know where to go to try to get that in, but it's sort of its last stage where the member states are involved, and can then you can adjust. You have a little screw here and there where you can a little knob you can turn a little bit and so on. But it's the big picture. It's difficult to change when it reaches this stage. But it is the nature of the European Union in itself. It's a mirror of that. So as many other places in the council and in the parliament and so on, you have the commission on one side, and then you have the member states on the other side, with something where you need to have a say on it. So that's that.
But I've seen decisions being influenced in the program committee, so it's not really a closed door. So especially I've seen
It's more in the, it's a small things like this. Sometimes you can introduce a call, but because of course I saw that, and I also probably helped stakeholders from Denmark introducing suggestions for call on the specific. But it's when you look at the whole picture, if you look at the whole document, then it's
yes. It's quite a cumbersome one, so normally it runs into hundreds of pages. So
yeah. But we're going to go back to because then you have all the structure of national reference group. You probably also have that in Malta that is in the process of like that back and forth. So there, of course, there are influences, but this whole work around the priorities of each sub-program, it happens somewhere else. But many of the same stakeholders that are involved in the reference group that we will come back to, they are often also involved in the work in the technology platform, so wherever they need to be to have their say. That's often the case.
Yes. And also do not underestimate the role of the associated countries, because the associated countries to the Horizon Europe program is the only place where they really can influence things. So for them, it's equally as important than the member states. Because contrary to other expert groups where they are not invited, here they actually have a say when they come to the program committees. So comitology-wise, it's quite like a different kind of setting when it comes to the comitology of the European Union.
Let's move into the next block, because there we will talk a little bit about how to set the scene. So setting the scene. So they work exclusively with the European Framework Program for Research and Development.
Yes.
You have the Commission side, you have the member states, and you have the associated countries. So you have, it's sort of, the Commission sits at the end of the table. Literally, they have a long table. I can describe it for you, and you can confirm if it's correct. So you have a long table at the end of the room where the Commission representatives, they sit, whatever needs to be, with secretaries also, to take notes. And then you have going, so you have vertical tables, rows down the room, with the tables on both sides. No.
Yes.
No, just on one,
facing each other. So we're facing each other. There are, I believe, 4 rows in total. So 4 rows of member states.
Where everybody sits, and each country sits, of course. They have, I think there's even is there a country tag in front of each country? So you can see
the country tag. Yes. So you have the flag. So we call it the flag. So you have the country flags in front of each delegation, and each delegation is normally given two seats or 3 seats, depending how big the delegation is.
Germany, for instance, would normally have 3. France, 3.
Even 4 sometimes.
Poland also has.
Poland.
Okay, so that's how it's so the whole practical setup. So that's how it's that's how it is. Where do the associated states sit?
So then the associated states are also sitting. So they sit at the end. So they come in alphabetical order, just like the EU member states. So we have the EU member states in the middle, and then the associated countries coming after that, also in alphabetical order.
And who are they now? You have the UK and you have Switzerland
Switzerland, Israel, Tunisia. Then you have Australia.
and New Zealand.
Australia and New Zealand have come in, I
Yeah,
believe.
yeah. They just
And
did that. Yeah.
actually, I'm not sure whether they have actually signed, but even Canada are in the process. So I know that imminently they are about to accede to the Horizon Europe through an agreement. And then you have Iceland, Faroe Islands, and then you have Moldova, Ukraine, Armenia, Georgia, Serbia, I believe Kosovo, Montenegro.
Yeah.
Quite a
So
few, quite a few.
so
So
you can imagine out there, if you have each country, just EU member states, that's 27. Then you have what we just mentioned. It's quite also a flow. And then you have the commission itself represented with sometimes anything from 5 to 10 people.
even more, even more. So the last meeting we've had on widening, I believe they were around 15, and another one in research infrastructures, I would say there were more than 20. So
Okay.
they really come prepared.
More than I
And
was back then.
Mhm.
The reason why I'm doing this is just for people to get an idea how it looks like. So it's because it also gives people an idea of how complex it actually is. What we're going to talk about now, because we're going to talk about the function and the working procedures and so on. But this is so that's the setting. When I was there, it always happened in the Albert Bourget building, stones throw away from the Parliament
Mhm.
and the council. And the Belmont, just down the street. The Place Jordan, is it still there?
Yes, it's still there. However,
Horrible building.
yes, horrible building. Yes.
And horrible coffee.
However, yes, I agree.
Legendarily horrible coffee.
Yes. However, my next meeting, believe it or not, is in a different building which I've never been to before.
Oh my goodness.
I still have to still have to see where it's going to be held exactly, but I saw the address and it's not the Borchet, so
Okay.
it's a welcome change.
For everybody who has not been to Brussels or been to this area, the Place Jordan, that's where you have one of the legendary old frites from Belgium. Where you get the double fried, infamous Belgian fries, fried in ox fat, with a heroically amount of mayonnaises, different amount of mayonnaises.
And always a very long queue to get it.
Yeah. No, that was a digression. Sorry about that. Now. So we set the scene. That's what it looks like. Let's look a little bit at the function. So what's the purpose? Yeah.
So as I explained, the purpose is mainly so the main thing on the agenda is always this negotiation of the calls. So the negotiations to see the work program, what it contains, what you can negotiate away from the current draft. Also to find information, for example, on the calls. Sometimes we have certain calls where there could be a little bit of a dubious or some questions raised with regard to an evaluation, for example. So that is the place where to ask whether the procedures were carried out correctly. We also find out some of the times more how people have responded to a particular call, and there we can have discussions on particular calls. For example,
Oh, yeah, it's true. You have statistics here.
we have the statistics, which I
Yeah.
find quite interesting, because sometimes a submission is done and then you don't know how people have reacted to the submission, but then you go to the program committee and they tell you, okay, so there have been 800 applications, for example, and this is the breakdown per country. So that's sometimes quite interesting to see that before you actually have the result, you can actually see what submission and what response there has been, even from your own country. So that gives you already a little bit of an insight how your researchers have responded to the call.
Yeah, and just to, because now we're getting into content here, and why is that important? Of course, there's the obvious reason that everybody wants to understand the submission number from their country. Each country is very interested in seeing submission from their country and how many from their country receive funding, because this is core to science and technology ministries for us. This is purpose, right? This is because everybody pays money into the budget. All countries, member states, pay to the budget of the Horizon Europe, the framework program. And of course, everybody wants as much back. So return on investment, so to say, it gets quite direct here in the terms of remember from the Danish government, it was, you had a priority of, we have to raise the getting external funding for our research. We have to raise the success rates. We have to get more coordinators for the long term and so on. So and this, the figures, that's core to that, naturally. It's because it's are we meeting our targets? Are we how are we faring? But it's also important in relation to understanding from the Commission side. It's very important to understand the success of the program. They are very interested in understanding the traction, so to say, how many beneficiaries find the program interesting to apply for, because that's the Commission's target. As many as possible should apply for the funding. They should be interested in these wonderful funding programs that they have sketched out here. So everybody is paying quite much of attention to these figures.
Yes.
How are your figures for Malta? Is it?
Well, our figures have been quite good under Horizon Europe, so much better than what we fared in Horizon 2020. So we've seen not a leap, I would say a quantum leap, because we have increased our coordinators, we have increased our participation overall, and we have increased our success rate, and we've also increased the amount of funding we received in the first 2 years. So the first work program, 2021, 2022. But so far for 23, 2024, I haven't seen such a big impact in terms of success rates. I have seen coordinators and applicants, but I have not seen too much success. So my take on our participation is that 2021, 2022 was stellar. It was really good. 23, 2024 was a bit less successful. But the applicants were there. So we've had, for example, for one call in particular, we had 29 submissions, which is a big submission for Malta.
That's sometimes with the long light, it's as important as actually getting the funding home, because a certain percentage of these will now have tried it, so they will do it again, and they will also be, if they had good consortia they were involved in, they will be invited in. It's easier for them to access it, and eventually they will get funds. So this is all a big funnel moving towards. So the more that apply, it's not that it doesn't matter that they don't get funding. It matters, of course, but it's also from a governmental representative point of view, as you are, to get the attention of the program and get them involved in it, because it's going to come back eventually. Now, so function, purpose. Now that's so you get figures, statistics, and then there's negotiation part, right? So can you explain? So you have for each program committee meeting, you have a draft of something. Normally, in the beginning of the circle, it's a very small, thin draft of a work program, and as closer you get to the ending deadline, it gets thicker and thicker.
So first, normally what we get is just a list of gaps and needs. Okay, so that is the starting point. Then the gaps and needs are translated into strategic orientations of the work program. So where the destinations will be going, what they will be looking at, what has been looked at already in the previous work program, and what needs to be looked at in the new work program, for instance. So it goes into steps. Okay. And member states are already involved in terms of providing feedback and proposing new topics that might not be in the strategic orientations, new calls. For example, we put forward, for example, quite a few on the research infrastructures this time, and widening as well. In this round, because at the moment we are negotiating the 2025 and also the 26-27. So this year has been quite disruptive, because this year we've had an amendment of the 23-24 to include 2025 in the work program, and we are also starting the negotiations for 26-27.
Yeah.
So we had these like two parallel processes working at the same time. So it's been quite a busy period.
It's just for listeners to understand that these documents, they come, it's very formal. You receive them from the chair. That's the commission, the person that's the chair. You receive them, and then you need to work them through in your organization before you go to the meeting. Make sure that everybody has a say. And if you have two processes running, you need to keep your tongue in the middle of the mouth, as we say in Danish. You need to okay, that's that process, and then this process parallel to that, it's related to the next, so I can perfectly understand the
So it was actually quite confusing for many, because sometimes you're not sure whether something has to go in the work program of 2025 or in 2026-27. So, and in one of the program committees, actually what we had was an amendment of 23-24 to extend to 2025 part of it, a separate work program for 2025, and another separate work program for 26-27. So you can imagine how confusing it could have all been. But it's that year where this is the odd year of the framework program. So the framework program runs for 7 years, and we have a work program per 2 years. So the 2025 is the odd year.
And this, dear listener, when I was back in the old days, 2008 to 10, it was annual. They were annual. Yeah, so it's not biannual. It was annual. So here, what Ian is talking about here is that the cycle now is 2 years. So you release a work program, and that releases calls covering 2 years. Many of you working with the Horizon Europe know exactly what Ian is talking about here. And then, because it's a 7-year work program, you have odd years in the end. So you will have, eventually you will come to a place where there's only 1 year that needs to be negotiated. But because of the processes in the commission, then they have to batch them in the end. And this is what has happened here. But so is if I keep a little bit onto the block here, the function. This is the function of the program committee. You need to handle these cycles of logic, so to say, of the commission's processes of how the program works. So that's you're in the receiving end of what the commission has decided how these things should work, right? So it's the function here of the program committee is to make sure that the negotiations of the work programs, even though if you have to do them parallel, that you make sure that everything is in order, that your government is approving putting the green flag up for what is being decided.
Correct. And yes, so apart from the disruption of this 1 year that we had in the middle, you also have to consider that there are the European elections this year, the change in the commission. So it's a really tough year.
The worst change is when it's a change between framework programs.
Yes.
Yeah, that's always tricky because you always have to wait for the commission to agree on the budget. So everybody knows the news when you have members that you have the ministers of finance and prime ministers and so on. They sit until 5 in the morning for several days in a row to agree on the overall budget. But the devil is in the detail, and the framework program is part of that big budget. And sometimes it's also been slashed. Part of the negotiations becomes a little piece of in the puzzle, in the big puzzle. And then the practical consequences for Ian here. He needs to finalize together with the rest of his colleagues in the program committee. They need to finalize this so the program can start. And normally these things, there's no break, or there shouldn't be in the ideal world. So it shifts the framework program, so there's not a funding break, so to say. So it runs, the old framework program runs out, and then you have new call dates. But you cannot announce call dates if the budget has not been agreed. And normally you would have call dates in on the other side of summer holiday, as everybody know, and I've been hammering against them because they are severe to people's mental health. But that's the fact. So you have September, later August, September deadlines. But if you don't have a budget decided in June, then formally the program cannot run. So that, I guess my best guess is, Ian, that when you sit in these, when there's a shift, when you shifted between Horizon 2020 and Horizon Europe, you're a tired man.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because
Correct.
you cannot, again, you have all the beneficiaries from the current say, what happens with the data? We don't know.
So sometimes it's just a stalemate, especially if there's the summer recess in the middle.
Mm. I think, as far as I remember, they had to move call dates last
Yes.
time. They had to push them. Because you're not ask people to you release a call and then they have 3 weeks to prepare a proposal. No, finishing the function here, we already talked. So the we talk a little bit about the negotiation side, because that's actually quite important. The negotiation element. So, and that's, so we already touched a little bit upon it, right? So the commission is on one side, and then you have the group of member states on the other side. So it's basically what it is. It's a negotiation setup. That's what it is. Yeah. In the ideal world, you agree on everything in the group, but that's not how it is. It is the commission proposing something, and then the member states, they say yay or nay, and then you need to find a solution. So that's what it is. Because that's an interesting part of it. Can you share a little bit how that works?
The negotiation, you mean?
Yeah.
So basically, we receive a draft work program where we have the opportunity to look at before a program committee. Normally, it's around 3 weeks to 1 month before the program committee. So there is time to have a look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Then we meet in a program committee meeting and we discuss general elements. Some just invite general comments on the whole work program. Others go destination by destination. And we have discussions on which calls would be more important than others, whether the budget. Actually, the budget sometimes comes afterwards. So first we discuss like the structure of the calls, who they are open up to. So whether, for example, industry can apply to them, or whether it's public authorities who can apply to them, or whether it's universities only. So especially under the widening component, we have a lot of these calls where they have a selective audience. So the calls have a selective audience who can apply to which calls. So there you can have these type of negotiations where you try, for example, to include other entities into a certain call so that they can become also eligible. We also have, for example, under health, sometimes we tackle certain diseases and not others. So then you have these negotiations trying to fit in certain diseases which might have been left out of or overlooked in the work program. So that's it basically. And then we go for we have this in the program committee. Then they invite written comments. So then we have a deadline for written comments, and then we can send in all our comments in writing. And on the basis of that, then the commission draws up a new draft of the work program, and then it's another cycle. So then we rediscuss in the next program committee the new draft.
Yeah. And so it's a constant, but we'll get a little bit back into detail about National Reference Group. But in fact, you sit with a mandate. You come with a mandate as a country. You have cleared up internally in the government administration what is our position according to strategic importance. What does our stakeholders say? You gather that, you go, and then you often you exchange also with allies, so to say. Yeah?
Yes.
In between the meetings.
So myself, for example, when we receive the work program, we have an expert group. We call them thematic expert groups. And we send them confidentially the work program to give us comments. So these are normally people who are quite knowledgeable in the area. Like, for example, if it's health, you'd have people, medical practitioners, for example, medical researchers. So because like advanced PhD students, for instance, that sort of know the area quite well. Okay, so they can give us this expert advice. We then receive the comments, and we sift through the comments. We prepare what is called an instruction note. So we have an instruction note, which is a formal document, which is then processed through the government authorities. So even endorsed by the permanent representation in Brussels. And that is when then I received the clearance to be able to put forward our positions. So then I go to the program committee, and on the basis of those instructions, then we can push forward whatever agendas we would like to push forward.
Yeah. And that's not.
And the alliances, you mentioned the alliances, which is an important element of the negotiation process. So
yeah.
In many program committees, it's not enough just to have your own instructions and then go to the meeting and try to fight the battle on your own. So it's always good to have from before already an alliance of member states who think in the same way that you are thinking, who can support your views when you intervene. So that creates like a bigger impact in the negotiation process.
Exactly. And work programs are quite big documents. So you have lots of calls covering different areas. Now, the important thing is here, you cannot clean the table. And everybody understands that. So there's something for all countries have a specific strategic interest within any socioeconomic area. And some countries have a big interest in specific socioeconomic area, and some have less. But either ways, there are different positions across the continent. Let's just give an example of energy. When I was sitting there, Denmark had a big interest in wind energy. Yeah, wind energy technologies, together with other groups of countries where the industry or research area were important, like the UK or Sweden, Germany. But other countries were more focused on geothermal energy, or what do you say? Yeah, coming from streams from the mountains, things like this turbines, or you would still have back then coal. Yeah, so you would have Poland because of their traditional with that. So you would. It's just to give an example that each country has a focus and a background of beneficiaries that you need to support. It's your role as a government, and then you group together, and then you manage to. So you don't clear the table, but you need to make sure, as much as you can, that your interests are supported in the work program. There's something for them to apply for, that supports the technology development in the research area or within a private sector.
As I mentioned in the beginning, I come from the background of negotiation and council. Okay, so it's slightly different to the program committee, but it's more intensive. So there you have legislation being negotiated. The Horizon Europe program is negotiated in the Research Working Party, which I was part of. So you have like really the big dossiers being negotiated there. And I mean, the experience I've had of these type of negotiations is that sometimes, as you said, you cannot clear the table. So we tend to prioritize according to what the top priorities are for my country and which are the less prioritized. And then we try to trade a little bit on the table, trying to say, okay, so I'm in simple words, you give me this and I give you that.
Exactly.
So
And there's
it's
a clear understanding in the group. Back then it was, and I imagine it's still like this. So there's a clear understanding between the positions of the different groups, so to say. But sometimes you do have clashes.
yes, and harsh ones too.
Yeah, because especially countries with a big self-confidence. Looking at you, Germany. I'm looking at you, Spain. Countries with that have a certain size. Also, the UK when they were in. It's France. You have these, like players that they sometimes put them. Sometimes you do get the feeling that we need to get this through, and it's like this. And so there comes a discussion. It's wait a minute. In the smaller countries, they they crowd up together. So it's yeah, but it's not that often you have them. But it is there is throughout a process with, I would say, for each work program process I've been involved in, there were also always one or two elements where there was a friction.
Yes, so especially under widening, for example, you always get friction there. Widening is really politically charged. So there are two states of mind working around the table, and yes, we see a lot of that, especially in the widening program committee.
A lot of people don't want to talk too much about this, but I because it's so politically charged. Also now because for FP10 suggestions, positions from countries, especially my home country government have suggested some changes.
I saw it.
That has
I saw that.
controversial for many countries. So many people, they don't want to talk about it. I had the Polish, and I just released the Polish episode this Monday with the talk with them about the NCP and the setup of, and they didn't want to talk about widening because it's too we cannot do that before our government has an official position on this. But yes, it's something that we have a concern about it. Something we have an opinion about.
In the end of the day, and as I tell everyone, so I am quite experienced when it comes to the widening pillar. So I've been in the like playing this game for quite some time. In the end, when you look at the statistics, because in the end it's the statistics that actually talk the facts. So the facts is that widening is not really a closed part of the program, as is imagined by many. So many think it's a closed part of the program, that it only benefits a specific set of EU member states. It's not the case. And I can tell you why, because if you look at the twinning call, which we've just received the results a few months ago, when you look at who got the funding, in the top you find Germany, France, Denmark, did quite well, Netherlands, and then you start getting the widening countries. Malta, for example, being a twinning call, being a widening call and a widening country, got zero. So, I mean, it's sometimes people try to put up this idea that it's a closed program, that we should not support it further, etc., etc., etc. But I mean, the results are there and they speak for themselves. So.
Yeah, I will soon release I recorded with Thomas Brent from Science Business, journalist, focusing on some of these things in his journalism for them. And he we talked about this, and my position is very clear on this. This is historic. It's a lack of historical understanding why you would suggest to get to scrap the widening initiative, because it's exactly serving a purpose of opening up the old planned economies, the networks to the Western networks, which has been a problem since they accessed the the Union. So it's just looking at an Excel spreadsheet. If you ask me, I think this is a matter of looking at an Excel spreadsheet. Where can we change the where the money they flow here in the program? Why there? We can do. It is
I mean, in many parts of the program. So if you look at the program, okay, and you dissect the member states, widening and non-widening. Widening normally takes between 10 to 12%. So already the non-widening are already taking over 80% of the funding. Then if you remove the top 3 widening countries, which the top 3 performing widening countries, and so you're left with 12 widening countries. Do you know the share of 12 widening countries, how much they take in the program? Have you any
it's
idea?
probably hilariously low, 1% or something like this.
It's between 2 to 3%, which is ridiculously low. Not even. It's not even funny, because
Of course not.
it's so low. How can you justify that 15 EU member states are taking 97% of the funding, and then 12 just 2%? I mean,
But that's the point about initiative like widening. That's the long light, and we need to open this up, because everybody knows that, as I continuously say in this podcast, it takes time to get into the good circles, but when you're in there, then you start to be invited again. And so this is a long light. So but you need to have a push that helps this. It's just like this. No, that's the degradation here. I love to have these discussions now. We have to move a little bit on so it doesn't get too long. But so that negotiation part, and then of course there's the approval. So that's just how it is. In the end, everybody agrees when it goes back and forth, and then you have the final session where everybody raise their hands, and then that's it.
Yes.
Now let's move into the working procedures, because that's really interesting for people out there to understand how things work. And we've been touching. It's difficult to have this conversation and divide it up without touching it already. But But let's just let's take it from the top. How the working procedures in the program committees work, because then you'll also understand how they function, and how the mechanisms they are. So let's just take. So first, you already mentioned the flow circle. We already touched that a couple of times. So there's a flow circle of work programs, and it's, as you mentioned, it's so it's every 2 years there's a new updated work program. And so there's a circle there. So every time, so we just mentioned the approval of that's the final stage. So when that happens, then starts a new circle. So normally when I was sitting in the committee, you would have approval in May or something like this, and then the program would be announced, released in the summer, and then you would have the first deadlines. So here it's two every 2 years. So you have you approve, and then starts the process in the program committee for the next 2 years. Yeah. So as we just mentioned, you receive a very thin suggestion, probably in the end of autumn or something like this, of that year. Yeah, like this, or maybe later.
I think at the moment with the 2-year program, it's a little bit more relaxed. So
Yeah.
So for example, we negotiated the work program 2023-2024, which was agreed to in November of 2022. We got the strategic orientations a year later for the new work program. So we got it around October, November. And now in June, we're starting to get the work programs. So the first draft of the work programs we just got for health, for example. I know I have for the missions, for example, for next year. But we've just received them like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So
Then
and now this is a run up until December. So we have to agree to these by December. Most probably they would be eyeing like an approval at the program committee stage by the end of summer, so that then they can do this inter-service consultation within the commission. They have this inter-service consultation, and then they are formally adopted in the end in probably November, December.
so for people to understand, we already touched a bit, so this might not be as long as, but the thing is, so you receive the first draft, and then what happens is that we sort of touched upon already a little bit. You get the document in, then runs the process in each member state where everybody checks their position. So you have the ministry, the government position on things, but most governments are having reference groups in the areas of strategic importance. And so do you. You mentioned that. Yeah. So
We
what
call them
happens?
the thematic expert group.
The function, of course, you can explain the function. What's the function of the thematic group you have? What is the function? Yeah.
It's nothing much. So basically, we try not to disturb them too much. Okay, so these are professional people. They are quite busy.
Who are they?
So basically, we have like people who have a deep knowledge in the area. For example, as I mentioned, I'm also the health program committee member. So there I was responsible to make sure that I have the right people in the thematic expert group. What I did was I split them between, I gave it like a quadruple helix approach. So I brought some people from university, I brought some people from the industry, I brought some people from the government, I brought some people also from the charities, from the patient organizations, for example. So there I can have a bit of a holistic view of things. Okay,
Exactly.
so basically that is how I organize the health part. The people
How do you work with them?
Very well, actually. So they are quite responsive, especially when so before I send out the work program, I would have already seen it myself. So I try to go through the work program, highlight areas where I feel they could be problematic, but I just want to double check.
Sure.
So I send out the work program as a clean draft so that I see what they are going to give me back. And then on the basis of what they give me back, then I can go back to them with my concerns. So I tell them, but have you had a look at this call? Do you think that it serves the right purpose, or maybe should we change it, or maybe should we propose something else? So
what I'm trying to do here is to make the listener realize your role and how you use this group. So what happens here is what Ian has just described is the government doesn't know anything. I'm putting things a little bit on the spot, right? Ian, in principle, Ian does not, but he does. You do, right? It's just Ian is a civil servant, and he can have his own opinion. He has his own knowledge, but in all, he needs to have the input from the best of the best from his country on what they, where they think priority should be going for research and innovation funding in the next coming years. And this is what this is what you're doing. Yeah, you gather the people to cover, so you can get input on the program composition, because each program has its own logic. So for the health work program, it's divided into you have specific technology flows, you have specific innovation processes flows, you have specific elements in there. And you need to dress you up. You need the ones that can cover these areas and tell you whether it's in the right direction or not. And then your role, it's exactly what you say, because you know your area. You've been working with this for many years. So you have the overview from where things are going from an overall point of view within the research technology areas, to give them some critical mass in the group. Say, do you think it's actually the best way, or should we maybe, from a strategic point of view, suggest something like this more? Yeah, is it correct?
Look, no one is an expert of everything. So
Exactly.
I can tell you that even though I have quite a lot of experience, 17 years working on so many different dossiers and areas and doing so many roles, always within research innovation, within the sphere of the European Union. So I've done so much, but I still feel I won't say I'm an amateur, but I'm not really an expert of everything.
No,
So
yeah.
So in my case, I depend on it a lot. Now, the mistake I see that is done by maybe other program committee members or maybe even other colleagues from other countries is that they send the work program and then they expect to receive feedback without a return. So sometimes the program committee member has to be active enough to be able to form his own idea on the work program.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do that, no one's going to do it for you. So at least in my case, I find myself quite more comfortable looking at it myself, making my own comments, and then going to the person if I need to. So
Because that's also the role that you have here.
mhm,
You're the translator. Because even though they are knowledgeable people, they are professors, they are strong within their field, private companies and so on. They know exactly what they're talking about. But that doesn't mean that sometimes they need to you need to calibrate their brain to the EU logic of things, because they might forget, even though they sit in such a group, they might forget exactly how it actually works. Sometimes you need to translate things a little bit, not being patronizing about it, but you need to sometimes take, without them realizing you're taking the hand, you take the hand and say, "Look, this is tuk."
so sometimes we do get actually comments like, the government needs to do more for this area.
Of course.
but
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but it's out of scope of the
Yeah, yeah.
of the of the exercise that we need, because
Yeah.
what we need is for them to think with a European mind, but obviously from the Maltese angle. So
Yeah.
being a small country, being peripheral, for instance, being a widening country. So w- in our positions, we put a lot of these elements inside so that we make sure that the calls are really inclusive and that they can really take on partners from Malta and not exclude us or
Yeah. So if we try to zoom out again, because now we're talking about the working procedures, I wanted to dig a little bit into this because it's very important for people to understand how these things function. What happens is that this is probably the most important part from getting your fingerprints of the country strategic fingerprints into the work program, because that's where the knowledge comes from. So being able to have a good reference group or thematic group, that is vital. So if you have a group with sleeping members, or it was sometimes we changed members in the reference groups to make sure it was updated to where the flow was going. Also, if we thought that we didn't get enough feedback or critical mass from specific members, then there would be a round of, now we revitalize the group, so to refurbish the group, we need some changes to, because that's what is the position. Yeah, that's what the countries are using these groups for. They are defining the position on that technology area.
exactly. So sometimes they are more knowledgeable on where the technology is going better than I am. So for example, especially now with the use of AI, for example, or AI tools and new developments in the industry, for instance, which I might not be aware of, but they would be. And then that is where I am able to pick up these kind of changes and these new developments which can then be proposed into the draft of the work program. So
Okay, so let's get back to so what happens here is that so the group, as you just described, you coordinate with them, you send out a commented edition of the draft you got. So you need to, here's a red flag, here's a red flag, here's a red flag. Comments. They get back with the comments, then you need to coordinate with your manager. You need to coordinate. No,
I put
Or
it
what?
together myself. So
Okay.
I create like a draft of
Mhm.
this instruction note, which I mentioned before.
Mhm.
We create this draft. I like to put it into a point form because I find it easier even when I am in council to read it out. So basically, I have point forms highlighting like what Malta how it needs to position itself on each item.
Mhm.
And normally I section them also destination by destination.
Yeah.
And then we have an approval procedure. So once I am finished, then I send it to the ministry.
Yeah.
And
That's what I want to.
they vet it from their side. And then it goes to what we call the EU Secretariat, which is a secretariat within the government, which is more like a clearance house. So basically,
Yep.
They look at the documents, they make sure that there were consultations on the document, that the positions are all in line with the overall government position. Because sometimes you have certain elements which are like a little bit sensitive. Like for example, in health, we have this element on ethics, for example, stem cell research, especially research on embryos, for instance. So sometimes you do have calls which are really borderline on this research on embryos, and sort of it's
You need to
like
check.
it's
Just like this.
important. Yes,
Yeah.
that even though I know the position, I am also always comfortable having, for example, the EU Secretariat having a second look from their side
Uh,
in case there has been any changes that I might not be aware of in the
yeah, but
overall government position.
it's official government position, right? So it's like this: you are a humble pawn in the system, so to say. Yeah, you are a mechanism in the larger machine, and of course you need. There's a political level also that the upper tiers of a ministry, research, science and technology ministry needs to approve these kind of things. But normally, the longer you've been there, the quicker the approval processes.
Yes, I mean, once you know the overall government direction, then it tends to get easier. So
And then, but maybe here you also, so we already mentioned it, the strategic coordination between countries in between meetings. So here, probably, how do you do you, do you parallel to what we just talked the process here? Do you coordinate anything with countries you need to team up with for the next, or do you wait until you have your position clear, or how do you jam?
normally it happens in parallel.
Uh,
Um, at the same time that you are coordinating the Malta position, normally you have uh, a separate process going on with the program committee members, already highlighting certain parts of the work program which could create a problem for them. And sometimes they share these ideas and they start saying, because maybe, I don't know, Italy is thinking in this direction and we should sort of team up together and see whether how many member states can agree to it. So already that is put into one of my highlighted positions to kind of bounce back at the national level before I commit myself with like
yeah.
alliance to before I join an alliance, because I mean you can call it an alliance that
The thing is, you also know them.
you also know them.
You
Yes.
know them, yeah, because you meet them all. You know exactly which ones you're voting together with.
Yes.
So it's sometimes you just need to you need to clear a specific issue where you know there might be a discussion. It's normally like that. You have an idea of where a discussion can pop up, where you will have different positions throughout the group, where some countries you sort of then you get rumors running through the program committee groups of positions or country that has released, for example, so I can remember, for instance, I remember Germany releasing an official position when I was sitting in the program committee in the middle of like of the process of something, and the government released a official position, and then everybody was like, it changed the dynamics, so to say, because we all had to coordinate according to that. You understand? Like, so sometimes you have these sort of where you get it in from the right. Poland has moved that way, or Ireland is now. So yeah.
So this process normally helps you also to understand that I mean, sometimes it does happen that you will not be looking at it in the right way. So sometimes I've had it quite a lot, both in the research working party and now also in the program committee meetings, that sometimes something looks okay, but in reality it's not, because another member state starts talking about it, and then you realize, oh, okay, so this is how it should be, and okay, now you get it. And when you have the benefit of knowing what your general government position is, then it could be easier to kind of streamline the process at the national level to contact who you need to contact to make sure you get clearance, and then you can join the discussion with like these new positions that come up like out of the blue sometimes. So
this, why I'm dragging this in here, this for people to understand the complex process, right? Like going from step to step, as we do now. It's because it's part of it, that you need to, because everything that Ian here is doing in between the meetings with that we just went through with his thematic groups and gathering positions and gathering input on where Malta should position themselves in the next meeting, that can be havoc if suddenly something happens in the balance of alliances, so to say. If somebody's changing their position, so it's important just to keep an eye on what's going on in the other countries if it comes out anyways.
Sometimes you don't even have control, so sometimes it just explode in your face at the meeting. So you sometimes I say, I didn't even see this one coming. So sometimes it's such a big issue that I even tell myself, I said, I didn't even realize that this could have been interpreted this way or in that way.
Which brings us to the committee meetings in the process. So what happens? So I always, like figuratively speaking, when I talk about this, so you would gather that and then would put all these things into the briefcase, the agreed, the instruction note, so to say. You have everything prepared, like this is our position on this draft, and then you go with your briefcase to the meeting and show up, and then you have the meeting itself, and we already sort of had discussed, talked about that, but maybe to give people an idea, meetings meetings are shorter in the beginning of the cycle than is in the end, and that's because you actually for you go through every single call text. Yeah, that's how I remember. That's how it was back then. You go through every single call. If you have a big work program with lots of calls, you go through every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this. And in the beginning, the text are short. There's not even text for some and so on. So that's quick. But in the end, towards what do you say, approval date, it's going to be quite long meetings.
Yes, sometimes it can be quite long, especially when you have certain calls where many member states have many comments.
You will have the occasion. That's also comes down to personal chemistry, right? You would have people in some of the program committees I was in, people that talk a lot, so or repeating themselves a lot. So it was I'm not going to point up any countries here, but but like you would have the occasional person from like that would always take like 15 minutes to make a small remark that could have taken 30 seconds.
Yes, you have those. And unfortunately, sometimes they even fall out of scope, because when you start talking for a long time, and then
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah. But that's the nature of the meeting. It's we just mentioned in the beginning here. Statistics come in, then the commission has introductory remarks, and then you start going through the. Remind me if I'm missing something here. But this is as I remember them. So then you start going through each call, and then there would be the commission would update on the process, right?
sorry, the commission
The
will.
commission is updating on the process.
Yes, on the process. So
From their end, so where are
So
we
basically,
now?
the agendas are normally, first you have the approval of the agenda, then you have the approval of the minutes of the last meeting, then you have, for example, the presentation of the work program and the discussion, and then you have, for example, there could be like a parallel legislation. For example, at the moment, there is a big legislation going on in the European health data space.
Mhm.
So normally they put that presentation into the program committee, so that we are informed of this extra kind of requirement that is coming for the member states. And then you have the evaluation of the calls, and then you have sometimes any other business, and then the closure of the meeting. So like as a bare minimum, this is what an agenda of the program committee looks like.
It's is the coffee still horrible?
Yes.
Uh, how
I
is it? Do they serve lunch? I forgot.
actually in floor 0 there is a machine which serves a better coffee than the coffee normally served outside the meeting room. So
It's good to have
in the
these little
break,
hacks.
I go down quickly to the canteen. It's next to the canteen, and I get a coffee from there, and it's cheap, so it's even better.
I know this is very eternal, but for any of you listeners out there that are sitting in any of the program committees, that's a tip for you. 3rd floor, Albert Boucher. You heard it. You heard it first on the ground. But I remember lunch. Now it's coming back to me. They do serve lunch, right? On the top floor, something like this.
No, yes, sometimes on the top floor, sometimes downstairs, but most of the time it's next to the meeting room. So literally in the foyer of
Oh
the, or
yeah, they serve
the
like a buffet style,
like
commission style.
yes. Now they are serving more sandwiches and like really good baguettes. So
And then the occasional cake, the
yes,
ubiquitous cake, selection
yes.
of cakes. We are in Belgium, right?
Mm.
Yeah. No. What else did I put here? So yeah, you have, and that's why the longer, the bigger the base document is, the longer the discussions, debate, and negotiations are, because that's the nature of what's going. So it's not just now we said we run through the core text. You just explained us the agenda and so on. But what takes time, that's the discussions. The discussions and debating and outright negotiations. It's the where you would often. So sometimes you have, as we have discussed here or shared with you here, you have disagreements in between member states, but very often you also have the full member state group and the commission standing towards each other in a case where the commission is insisting on something where they want things a specific way, and you have the group saying no, we don't want it like this, and everybody is always looking at the big guys. So France and Germany, if they if that was how it was anyways back then, if Germany would say something or France would say something, then the commission would sit and look down the table like a little schoolboy, because they know if they say something, then it's difficult for them to.
Actually, one of my funner traits is actually having an opposing position to France or Germany or one of the big guys.
Yeah.
Coming from a small country, I always find it a bit rewarding to have opposing views and to create a little bit of a stir in the program committee. In some program committees, it's so like nothing happens that you need some kind of controversy happening, and when I have something, I enjoy it. So I am a person who likes putting down convincing arguments and counter arguing until I get my way. So
I was not controversial. People that knows me, they would say that we cannot believe that, because I have the same. I like sometimes to kick to the pile of leaves, to get or to say to like to be the little boy in the emperor. They want to say the emperor's new clothes, you know. But what's this? There's no clothes there. Yeah.
No, it's nice to be controversial sometimes. So, for example, the last program committee I had on research infrastructures, I came up. No, I didn't come up. So people were talking about this widening issue, and I picked it up very quickly, and I created a little bit of a, how should I say, a controversial discussion, which then made Germany, Spain, Italy, everyone was debating this central issue, and I wasn't expecting it actually. So
yeah, I love it. Yeah, but I guess the widening program committee, you would also have lots of discussions.
Yes, quite a lot of discussions there. Normally, so actually, the discussions are more politically charged in the research working party to decide the widening pillar. At program committee level, it tends to be lesser than that. However, you do have everyone fighting to make sure that their country can participate fully in the call, and normally we have certain calls under widening where you have 70% going to the widening and just 30% to the non-widening. So there we have a little bit of a struggle between the member states to increase or decrease that percentage. So
I'm going to I'm going to zoom a little bit in on the widening in the future, but so that's a cliffhanger for people out there, because it's a very interesting program, and the truth is that I haven't worked with it, so it's I don't know in detail about the program. So it's but I like the discourse of it. So now. We're almost finished with the working procedure block here. So what happens is that the meeting ends. You have all your at every single meeting you will have things where the commission needs to clear something up. They need to adjust the work program for comments and so on and so forth. And then it's always like this: when you receive the next edition, because that was when we go home. And then you wait for the updated work program based on the discussions that you had in the committee, but it's never one-to-one. So there's always a basis for discussion. But why didn't you incorporate this or this or this? You know, because everybody put carefully notes of their own things. Yeah. So, and I guess it's the same now.
It's the same now. So basically, even you see it, especially in the last discussion, they get more serious. So in the beginning, it can start with a normal position that okay, we might not like this and we want to see this change, etc. But then when you come to the last meeting, everyone is pulling his rope as hard as he can. So you can imagine the struggle there.
So that's what happens. So that's why you have to be, so as a Ian, my dear guest here, when you receive that the first draft, after like the next draft, then the first thing you do is to check what was discussed, what were priorities, what did we agree on, and is that incorporated? And then you make little red flags where it's not, and then it's something that will be discussed next time. It would be a part of your, and then the cycle starts again. Yeah, so it would be part of your of what you will bring in your briefcase.
Yes, exactly. So basically, you need to be present in all the discussions to know the background of how and why you have arrived where the work program has arrived. So
Yeah. Let's. I've added the block here because now we covered this. It should be very clear now. I think we did it quite pedagogically. I added a block called "Get Your Voice Heard" because it's in relation to if you have an opinion, if you have a priority or something like this. If you sit as a research institute, research team, or if you sit as a private company, technology related company, and you actually have an opinion, and you actually have something to say, why are there not funding for a specific sensor type or whatever within the area that we're working with, and you find it important? How do you get that into the work programs now? There are other of these podcast episodes will zoom in on technology platforms and all that place. But now we're looking at the program committees, the government side of it. So we have meticulously went through these reference groups or thematic groups as they have them in Malta. So those are representatives that are officially appointed. Yeah. Do you have is it it's an official process that you have with you when you appoint them, that they are officially appointed from the Maltese government to be sitting in the thematic group of cluster 1? Yeah.
exactly. So they have
Can
a
they
terms of
apply?
reference. They
Can they
apply.
apply, or do you appoint?
No, we appoint. So
Okay.
we appoint on the basis of the knowledge that we think they have. So normally we know that for example they are either representing a whole sector, they are people who know the developments in the specific technology, or I mean, they also change. They change quite often. So sometimes you get some experts who change positions. So then they still remain relevant in their personal capacity, but then you might need to nominate someone else to represent, for example, the industry or the segment that they were representing before. So we have a terms of reference, and they have to also sign a confidentiality agreement with us. They also have to sign like a conflict of interest agreement to make sure there are no conflict of interests. We take it quite seriously, so it's a bit of a sensitive. So they come in a very sensitive part of the negotiation. So it's very important that the work program is not shared beyond this group of experts. So they are people we trust, people we can talk to, and we know that we are going to receive valuable feedback from them, etc. Then on your question,
important point there. It's important that people understand us because it's sensitive, some of it. It's government position sensitive stuff and so on. It's also some of them will get information where they actually have an upper hand compared to research competitors, for instance. Yeah, researchers from other research organizations within the same field. They get a horse head ahead. Yeah. To say it's yeah. So so what you just said is quite important. That's a very privileged position to sit in, to be part of such a group. I was breaking you off. What you was about to say something.
Yes, I was going to say something, but I forgot. It slipped my mind actually.
Maybe it was about how other people can get their voice heard.
Yes. Okay. So actually, one tool that I found really useful. So basically, my comments to the European Commission, because as I mentioned before, you go to the meeting and you have your own comments and you can say it live in the meeting. But after the meeting, then you can send your written comments. And in the written comments, I make sure that I actually propose text. So I get the work program, I go through it, I see what needs to be changed, and I change it. So I kind of do the work of the commission already, so they do not have to prepare the text themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically I propose actual text. So if, for example, I don't know, we would like to include like a new technology into the call text.
So you write the call text.
I write it directed. So there it's already written. And then a second advice would be these alliances. So at least in our line of work, one of the most important element is to create alliances independently of the negotiations. So from before that, so when I was first nominated as program committee member, the first thing I did was I started having bilateral meetings with fellow program committee members. So with France, with Germany, with even the UK, with Italy, with Spain, with other widening countries, because I wanted them to get to know me. Okay, so when I went for my first meeting, I already knew everyone. So it helps a lot. It helps a lot because once you establish a one-to-one relationship, then it's easier even to bounce some ideas. Sometimes I have certain ideas which I'm not 100% sure of, so I go to the experts. So you always have a really big expert in your program committee meeting. So someone who is knowledgeable more than other program committee members. And actually, I target them a lot because I know that they have a good background. So when I have a doubt anywhere in the work program, I can freely go to them and ask them for advice or their views. Just their views would be enough. So it helps a lot.
So this is good tips and advice for everybody out there who is also sitting and working in the program committee on behalf of a country. So that you have those tips of how of working here. What I would also touch upon in this section is how if you're not appointed to a reference group, but you have an opinion, or if you sit in a research team or university, whatever, and you have an opinion about things, or whatever, private research, or what we did when I was an NCP, we would say to our stakeholders and beneficiaries, if you do have an opinion, contact us, because I was probably also you're an NCP at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah. So I would say when I would have information meetings or in that function, I would say, look, we also do program committee work, and we do have reference groups for the formalities, so that structure like this. But if you actually have an opinion, contact us and let us know if what it is, So I did have bilateral meetings with big companies or research organizations or other stakeholders that had wanted to have a say, or would say, look, we think it's important that this area is being good. Then we would internally in the ministry, we would weigh, we would weigh it, try to include it in the positions if it didn't speak against the position from the reference group. You understand? What I also did when I changed positions from the agency and was working for the Danish offshore renewable sector, I got creative about it. So I created my own reference group. I was working on behalf of the whole country for a sector. And I was civil servant. I was working, it was a regional authority money. So I sort of had that, it was not a for-profit position. It was still, I was still a civil servant. And I created that reference group exactly from the principles that Ian has just mentioned. Here I had research, industry, SMEs, and so on. And they gave, so I had I ran that group myself like a normal group like this, gathered input, I sent them the work program, and then I sent that to the program committee member for energy in the government. a former colleague, and she was very happy because she would get the input for like things she didn't have the time for herself. I would hand her in information and positions from core stakeholders, like, so they would kiss me for sending that information because they didn't have the time to be so specific, but it was still strategically important area for the government. So you're a little bit creative about it and get a good connection with your public representative, so to say, like you, Ian, and have a dialogue. If it's valid and if it's, if there's a point, then you, as a government representative, you listen to your beneficiary, right? Because you work on behalf of them. And if it's a valid point, if it fits with what you do, then it's often open ears. Like it's I've never seen arrogant colleagues in Denmark when they would be approached by beneficiaries to say, "Can we actually?" Then there's a helpful manner in trying to see if you can help. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then you would guide them. I would guide them also. That's one thing. But another thing is I would guide them towards the technology platforms, or like the levels in Brussels, the fora in Brussels where you can actively be involved.
Mm-hmm. So also sometimes you get certain stakeholders who are just pulling their own rope. So then part of our role is also to kind of sift through what we receive and making sure that what we are going to put in, we're going to put in something which is in the interest not only of certain individuals or companies, but really of a national importance. So
Yeah. Do you have anything you want to? Is there anything?
as I told you, I mean, at least for me, the most important element is to have these alliances to make sure that people know me in every program committee, that they trust me also, because you also need quite a lot of trust in these type of meetings. People that you that feel comfortable talking to you. So sometimes you get also these new program committee members. I also make an effort to meet them and speak to them to see who they are, where they're coming from, if they need anything you can offer your help, because maybe one day down the line you might need their help. So
No.
so it's always good to keep these good relationships.
Let's just move on to the last segment I always have, the toughest challenge. So, what's the toughest challenge in sitting in the program committees? Is it the juggling?
Not really, because I like it. So I'm coming from that background. And actually, the more controversial an issue gets, the more fun I have.
No, I'm not talking. I'm talking about the juggling of all the like of the different interests. And
so for me, it's very difficult because I am national contact point and program committee member for 5 areas, which is really difficult.
That's a lot.
I wouldn't, however, at the same time, I wouldn't change them for anything, because I feel I grew in each of these program committees.
Yeah.
You feel part of the family. So for me, I've entered the family. I do struggle sometimes with a lot of admin stuff, but that is more admin stuff, which is related to our organization. So not really the program committee work. Yes, I mean, that is the biggest challenge, to juggle and to reach all the deadlines, especially when you have to send in comments on work programs, etc. So
yeah, and if your reference group is not reacting, or like, and you do need the comments, it's like this. Also,
when the expert group doesn't react, it's a problem, because then you're either going to go and stay quiet, or else you have to do the work yourself and then work it the other way around.
Assuming what they want. I remember a little bit. I remember that a little bit. All right. Ian, it's been a pleasure. I'm just going to land the plane before we say goodbye to the listeners. So, dear listeners, thank you so much for listening to the end. Been a pleasure having Ian here, being reminded of my old work back then. It's an extremely interesting position. So if any one of you can have the chance to get a hand on a position like this, do it for Christ's sake, because it's really a view into the machine room. Now, if you like what you've just been listening to, then you should go to my website, thegrant.eu. And there you'll find a lot of episodes specifically on Horizon Europe. There's also a lot about the process ecosystem. You can hear a lot about how you can work the city, so to say, how you can get involved, and so on and so forth. So browse that. It's I can highly recommend it. I try to categorize my episodes, so you don't have to shift through everything. You can find it through the buttons that I have in the top. While you're in there, don't forget to subscribe to my email list. That is how you grow as an independent podcaster. So if you have any sympathy at all with what I'm doing here, by all means, subscribe to that. And thank you in advance for that, my dear listeners. And finally, connect with me on LinkedIn. Niels Tudor Winther. That's where the fun happens. That's where the flow goes. And recently, I have established the Grant site, so go and follow that. I am trying to shifting my information flow to the Grant site, because there's a lot of mixed information on my personal, on my LinkedIn site. Yeah, that's that. That's it. You're off, Ian.
Thank
You
you.
can run out and play. It's a very nice. I can tell the listeners now. Ian here is sitting on a rooftop in Malta, and there's a bright blue sky behind him. The sun in the back, and it looks just plain nice. So you can see over the rooftops here. So yeah, it could not be more idyllic.
Yes. And it's a public holiday in Malta today as well. So
your son is having his exams.
Yes, and my exams on Monday, so it's quite.
I can even see boats and water here in the back.
Yes.
You live nice, Ian. Cool.
Yes.
And you even have a swimming pool.
Yes.
Nah. Love to see that. Oh, how lovely. No, Ian, thank you so much for coming around.
Thank you.
And I will put a hook on you if I need to do something with the widening perspective.
Yes.
Huh?
You'll be talking to the right person.
Yeah. So, Ian, have a lovely rest of this holiday today, and have a lovely weekend. And let's say goodbye to the dear listeners. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Grant. All the Grant episodes have their own site on the Grant website. You will find the link in the episode notes where you listen to your podcast. On the site for this episode, you will find the link to Ian's personal LinkedIn site. Further, you will find a link to an overview of the program committees, which is listed on the Austrian ERA portal. In next week's episode, I have a managing director in the virtual podcast studio. Always happy to have top management on board. Olaf Geertgemein is heading the grants consultancy company Impact Fund in Europe. He has been leading and developing a nice approach and concept to developing strong visuals in EU proposals, which he will be sharing with us all. You can indeed look forward to that. Finally, some of you might have noticed that I'm slowly starting up a collaboration framework for organizations that want podcast episodes with their own profile, flagging topics of importance for them specifically. Grant's consultancy company Inspire Science have their own series with 3 episodes flagging their capacities within different areas of supporting research organizations towards EU funding. And so can you. The possibilities are many. Flagging your capacities as a company, pushing a message towards the Brussels ecosystem as research organization, promoting an important event, or boosting your communication strategy. The Grant offers a plug-and-play solution with a podcast host with 16 years of experience within the EU R&D field, which secures the solidity of the content. I'm not just a journalist, I'm a conversation partner that understands your perception. The Grant is also open to joint EU proposals as a partner or subcontractor. Adding sound to the proposal communication strategy can be a strong addition to connecting with the project stakeholders and the world beyond the realm of the project. Reach out through LinkedIn or my website if interested. See you next week.